Hello, and welcome to the Art and Science of Awareness. On the last Tuesday of each month, we invite researchers working on the cutting edge of mindfulness science to talk with us about what they've been discovering. I'm Lisa Ferreira Gormley from Living Well Community, the virtual library of live and on-demand wellness programming created and curated for you by Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare and Tufts Health Plan. I'm thrilled to be joined this afternoon by Tara Healy, the founder of our mindfulness program, and our special guest, Dr. Chris Willard. Chris is a psychologist, speaker, and author of 20 books with a focus on mindfulness, mental health, emotional intelligence, and child development. He is also a faculty member at Harvard Medical School and serves as a consultant to organizations including the Mindfulness and Education Network and the Institute for Meditation and Psychotherapy. Chris, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, it's so wonderful to be here. With the two of you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. And Chris, it's been such a long time, so I'm really delighted to have this opportunity for us to chat. And what I thought I'd do is just kind of kick it off with your mission statement, which is to help individuals and organizations around the world transform their lives and improve their well-being. And it's such a beautiful and lofty statement, really, of your, kind of your mission. And what brought you to this work? Like, could you tell us a little bit about what was the earliest spark that kind of guided that mission and the work that you do?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way I grew up, my parents were very oriented toward helping other people. My mom was a psychologist. My dad worked for the Environmental Protection Agency. So care about the climate, care about the earth, care about other people was pretty central to the values of my family. And then mindfulness was not particularly an explicit part of their lives, but when I was younger, but I had experiences when I was a kid, like just being in nature, going to a camp, and the counselor is saying, let's just, notice all the sounds we can hear in the forest, or being with my dad and him saying, if you just focus on one cloud and you breathe, you can make the cloud disappear with your mind. It was like this amazing magic trick that I look back and realize, oh, that was kind of mindfulness before mindfulness, and it was connection, and it was presence, and it was related to the environment and everything around us. And that really planted a lot of those seeds for me, of mindfulness, and then wanting to care for others, care for the planet, and make some positive transformations in this world. Yeah.
I love that, Chris, because it's not even like it was necessarily labeled anything, but you can now, right, like connect back to that period of time and realize that your parents were planting seeds in a very, very natural kind of organic way, that influenced you and brought you to this work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel so grateful. Yeah. For all those seeds. Yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So I'd love to move into kind of more of the heart of your work, Chris. And you do a lot of work with youth, with young people. We are in such a time of stress and anxiety. I mean, politically, environmentally, economically, there's so much uncertainty, and young people seem probably even more impacted by it than certainly than previous generations. And would love to have you just kind of say a little bit about your work with young people. You can even break it down by age as well. But what are you seeing, kind of in terms of stress, and then how are you working with it?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly since, we've seen stress levels in kids going up, we've seen them accelerating in the pandemic, which we're recording this about just a little after 5 years. Remember, it's supposed to be 2 weeks. I think we're at that 5 years and 2 weeks point.
Very much so.
5 years ago, we were all coming back out of it. Yeah, if only. So that had a tremendous impact. I think a lot of us have seen it, but Jonathan Haidt really recently articulated it in the Anxious Generation, his book that came out almost a year ago. At this point, the role of social media, the role of screens and digital devices, and the misuse of those. I think these can be used for amazing things around connection and change and healing. They just unfortunately that's not where the money is for a lot of the companies that are pushing them onto all of us and onto our kids as well. And so we see actually much more anxiety, we see more depression, we see more all kinds of struggles that kids are having, much more suffering. And you think, as a therapist is my day job, I think often about, I think it was Aaron Beck came up with the cognitive triad, basically, of like, you become depressed if the future looks bad, if you see yourself as bad, if the world seems bad or negative, and it's hard to not be negative about those things right now, or at least two of the three for most people. So all of this stuff is impacting our kids and coming together as there's political instability, as there's economic instability, as there's climate instability, as there's just global, more conflict than there was 10 or 15 years ago. And so this is trickling down in all these ways to our kids. And yet I think also young people, there is more hope in certain ways. There's amazing amounts of creativity. There's amazing amounts of innovation among young people trying to use social media for good, use AI for good, out there protesting these things that are going wrong, out there advocating for mental health, which I've never seen the level of stigma this low. And I say that globally. I mean, I was talking to someone this morning, about a trip I had to Egypt recently, and I was really blew up my own stereotypes. But these kids, high school kids at the school where I was working, were telling me, "Oh, I have social anxiety, I have depression." I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing!" And social media has actually really destigmatized mental health. Even if it spread actually a lot of misinformation about mental health, it's also destigmatized mental health. So how do we find this balance?
Yeah. And I think, what you're pointing to too is using these technologies for good. And you're also seeing that in young people that, yeah. And Chris, are you sharing mindfulness practices or certain techniques with young people, and how are you seeing that they are taking that in?
Yeah, it's been really exciting for me just to watch the growth and interest in mindfulness. I have like practices for little kids, just sort of silly breathing things. A friend and I wrote a book called Alpha Breath that's like, the ABCs. There's like breathe in and breathe out like an alligator, or flutter your wings as you breathe in and breathe out like a butterfly, or superhero breaths and things like that. I have done a lot of work with adolescents as well, trying to help them understand self-compassion, and apply it to themselves, offer it to themselves. I work a lot these days in particular with university students, college students, and have done mindfulness groups on college campuses, and just helping those kids who have such kind of perfectionistic tendencies to slow down a little bit, to learn how to regulate their nervous system a little bit more effectively, and also some side effects around maybe some focus and confidence and things that they want in terms of the academic side of things. So I feel like it's been really exciting to watch people of all ages get interested in contemplative practice, in mindfulness and yoga and self-compassion and compassion and so many other related practices is inspiring.
Yeah, that is really, I don't think I realized you were also working with college age. So you're working with really young, like doing the alpha breaths, and with college age kids, but seeing receptivity and openness to that. I'm actually going to bring Lisa in for a minute, because I know Lisa had a question, and as a mom of an almost 3-year-old and one on the way. Lisa, I think this might be a good time for your question.
Thank you, Tara. And actually, before I ask my question, for those of you tuning in, I just want to encourage you, please drop your questions into the chat as they come to you. And I'll be popping in later on. I can pull some in if we get any questions coming through. But for my question, Chris, you're talking about the alpha breaths, and I'm already thinking, okay, I might go get that book for my daughter that we'll start working on. But with these sort of youngest children, sort of in this toddler category, what are some great actionable tips for parents and caregivers to start laying this foundation early for them in a way that is developmentally appropriate? And sort of how does that progress as they get to school age?
Yeah, I mean, what I've tried to do over the course of my career is create or adapt practices that really can grow with kids. So that when they're, 3 and 4 years old, something like the hot chocolate breath, you can imagine you're breathing and smelling and blowing out, cooling off. And my daughter was doing that when she was 2, right? Because she was just doing that with her soup anyway or her pasta, right? And then as kids get older, they don't have to be holding their hands up, or they don't have to be imagining the soup or the hot chocolate or whatever it is. They're just learning to regulate their breath, and they get to be 10, 11. They can just then be aware of their breath, first regulate it, then watch their breath as an anchor, watch it rising and falling, and the whooshing sound, almost like waves in the ocean, and the images can fall away. And then we can get into a concentration practice so that it's kind of like the training wheels come off over time, right? The imagery, the movement can be the training wheels. And also, if the training wheels don't come off, that's fine. Like, I still love to do hot chocolate breaths, and I'm 47 years old. Like, it's not an issue. So I think that's really important. But I keep coming back over the 20 years I've been doing this, like pulling back from the kid and more toward the parent and caregivers. So the best way to create more mindful, compassionate kids is just to surround them with more mindful, compassionate adults. If you want stressed out, unhappy kids, surround them with stressed out, unhappy adults. But if we have the teachers, if we have the educators, the clergy, the therapists, the parents, the grandparents, right, then we get that co-regulation, we get that emotional contagion that mindfulness offers. Parents who are well regulated will be way more likely to have kids who are a bit more well regulated. So talking to parents is a lot of what I do, even if it's, parents are crazy busy. So like, 20 minutes of practice is pretty tough as a parent, right? But maybe it is 1 or 2 breaths before you get out of bed to get the crying baby. Maybe it's, getting home from work, you pull into the driveway. A father I work with a really special needs kid and kind of chaotic household, he drives home, stops in the driveway, just does 3 breaths. Breathing in, I know that I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I know that I'm breathing out. Walks into the house and he says, Chris, I'm not always bringing calm into the house, but at least I'm not bringing more chaos into the house when I am able to take that pause in the driveway in that way. And I think that's some of what we're doing. Or as we leave from home to work, we take a few breaths, we notice 5 sounds around us, we mindfully walk into the building or focus on our breath while we're waiting for the elevator at the office. It's almost like we're emotionally disinfecting from the chaos of the family in the morning, or the difficulty with traffic, or the refusal to put on the jacket. And then we can do the same at the other end of the day to kind of wash off the stress and come home and be a calm presence, attachment object for the child and the rest of our family, or anyone else in our lives. So these are ways I think of just integrating it in these years as parents, that we're not going to have a lot of 45 minutes of uninterrupted, insight timer time is the reality. So we've got to get real about it. Yeah.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I feel like these, many moments, little moments, many times over the day matter. Like that, I sort of think of it as drops in the bucket of awareness. And it's a practice. It's called a practice for a reason, right? And I think so often people say, I'm not good at it, or I can't do it. And usually it's based on misconception. Um, but Chris, do you want to say maybe a little bit about what are you finding most challenging, whether it's working with youth or one of the questions I was going to ask, but you've already gone into, is working with parents and guardians, and the importance of those folks starting with little practices. But as you do this work, yeah, can you highlight what are some of the challenges and how do you work with that? And it could either be resistance, you come across a child or who's like, oh, this is not for me. How do you manage that?
Absolutely. With kids, I think resistance comes up in different ways. And I think trying to understand the reason behind it, like, a kid, squirmy kind of ADD kid, right? It's like sitting still. Well, let's not sit still. Let's do some mindful walking. Let's do some mindful stretching, right? A kid with trauma or anxiety or social anxiety, like they're not going to want to close their eyes. Are people talking about them? Does this feel safe, right? So we don't do eyes closed, right? So I think it's knowing the kids and where the resistance might be coming from. And then I think also sometimes it's knowing when, like this might not be the time. And I might not be, as a parent, maybe I'm not the person. My kids will do meditations with me. They ask for them before bed, which I kind of think is so that they can just stay up later. But the truth of it is, like they do love like a 10-minute visualization before bed. There'll be a time, or my son loves like 5 minutes before his soccer game because Leo Messi practices mindfulness, so it's cool,
Yeah.
right? They're great soccer players. So, that's great right now. I also know they're going to grow up, they're going to roll their eyes at me, but hopefully the seed has been planted. And for a time, maybe it's someone else who can water the seed. Maybe it is a therapist. Maybe it is a soccer coach, a music teacher, a cool teacher at school, a friend of the family. Maybe it's at summer camp. There's someone who teaches this to them or can continue to be their teacher in some ways, and that's developmentally appropriate. So
Yeah.
these are some ways I think of thinking about resistance with kids, and also just being able to be flexible and respond to the moment. The moment being the moment in the day, but also the moment being the developmental place that the child is in terms of their relationship with us.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. I often think sometimes people think that, they hear mindfulness or meditation and they think one thing, but you're talking about adaptations.
Mm-hmm.
And there are so many adaptations.
Yeah.
Um, even I remember when my niece was really young and um, she was in like a screaming fit, right? Like that would almost seem like an inconsolable kind of scream. And then I stepped outside with her. She was an infant, but I stepped outside with her and it just stopped.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
just stopped. And it was summer. So, and there were lots of sounds, natural sounds of wind and birds and so interesting because the adaptations are as simple as just grounding yourself,
Mm-hmm.
bringing your attention to the soles of your feet,
Yeah.
and taking a moment to just be present with how you're feeling and what's going on around you.
And our senses are so great for that. Being outdoors is so great for that, as you're saying, Tara. I mean, just that, like, let's take a step outside, right? Suddenly the environment is different, right? Can you feel the wind on your face? Oh, doesn't the fresh air of spring smell good? Like, oh, I wonder how many birds are chirping right now. Like,
Yeah.
even just like I almost call it like mindful questions, mindful prompts or provocations. Like you don't have to say like we're gonna mindfully listen to the birds. It's just like how
Right.
many birds do you
Right.
think are chirping? I think I hear 5 different birds. Do you?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I think I smell 3 different flowers. I can smell the roses, but I can also smell I think that tree over there, and I can smell the diesel of the bus going by. Like
Yes.
it's again that provokes sends blood to the prefrontal cortex. It provokes curiosity. Curiosity shuts down anxiety. Curiosity shuts down the fight or flight response. Like I mean it's just it doesn't have to be like we're gonna go do a mindful walk in nature. I mean some kids are gonna
Right.
love that, other kids are gonna be like yeah no, but it's like how do we just, or adults for that
Yeah.
matter, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
How do we just find the right question, the right prompt to provoke a little bit of mindfulness and curiosity in that moment?
Yeah. As you're saying all of that, Chris, it sort of reminds me of what your parents did with you.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't like we're going to do this thing. It was more just kind of dropping in prompts and,
Mm-hmm.
how incredibly effective that was. And even I think just noticing qualitatively the difference between being lost in thought and rumination and
Mm-hmm.
then being where you are. Like
Mm-hmm.
you can test that for yourself qualitatively. What is the difference for you
Yeah.
when, right? When you are lost in a rumination, which rumination more often than not tends to be worry, and
Mm-hmm.
then bringing yourself
Mm-hmm.
to where you actually are. And yeah,
I mean, that's what I think it was our mutual friend Chris Germer, maybe who I heard this from first, I can't remember, but said, our minds are wandering to the past or the future, but our five senses are always in the present. And that is where that, like, just like, are you really listening to the music? Can you really taste the food? Like that it really just does bring us back in this really powerful way. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting too, just even, relating it to food, tasting the food. I was listening to two podcasters talking about how, when they had a really great meal and then they wanted more of it and the second helping didn't quite do it, right? Like
Yeah.
it's so, yeah, it is just an interesting thing, the beauty I think of this practice
Mm-hmm.
is that we can test it for ourselves. We can see for ourselves. We don't have to blindly believe.
Absolutely. And for kids, that's so important to be able to say, it's like, say to my son, like, well, why is 5 + 5? It just is. I don't know, like, why did I can't remember what kind of geopolitical question I mean, this morning, my son, 10 years old, why do we have countries? Like, why do we have borders anyway? And I was like, it's like, dude, we gotta go to school in 2 minutes, man. Like, I love this question.
I love
But
that.
like,
Yeah.
but mindfulness also, like, it opens us up to curiosity. It opens us to explore these answers for ourselves. And it also opens me up to also be like, that's such a cool question. Like let's discuss it in the car and not shut it down, but also get curious about it too. But like it is sort of like I think rather than telling kids this will feel good or this is a way to calm yourself down or you're too angry, you're too sad, or you're too whatever, like let's explore, what does sadness really feel like in your
Yeah.
body, and maybe we'll put on a sad song because that'll help us to notice, this song makes me have a lump in my throat and I feel kind of cool and cold when I'm sad, or listen to an angry song and I notice like my heart is pounding and that's what anger feels like. And does anger mean you have to punch the wall, or can you actually take a few breaths and that the impulses with it start to slow down? So like
Yeah.
these ways of empowering kids with their own curiosity and questions rather than just telling them what to do. I
Right.
think
It's
is
so great.
all about
Because
it.
you're in a way, you are teaching them to take care of whatever has arisen, right? Just take care of whatever, like nurture that, allow it.
Mm-hmm.
I know we're at 12:22 and I'm going to bring Lisa back because I also want to see if there's anything that's come in the chat, Lisa, or anything
Yeah.
that has inspired you in this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So, first, we've gotten some thank yous, Chris. So, some folks writing in just to thank you for this work that you're doing and commenting on how important it is. And then also just sort of a play off of what you had said before. A question came in. You had talked about, if you want to raise mindful kids, you want to raise resilient kids, surround them with mindful adults. And so we got a question here, just kind of echoing that, the importance of having adults practicing mindfulness and inquiring. In these times, we all need more positivity and more focus. So how can we block out the negativity?
I think it's about finding a balance. I mean, I think the prescription to just shut off the news is unrealistic because sometimes we still are in the world and we still hear things from people at work or on the sides of the playground. Did you hear this horrible thing that's happening now? And so we need to be informed. I think it's about learning how to kind of titrate what we're taking in and take in a balance of the negative and the positive. And when we share, I think it's really important to do this. One of the things that I've taken to doing in the last decade or so is when there's negative news that I want to share with somebody, I try not to do that without also sharing like what it is I'm going to do. Like I'm upset about this thing. I'm going to, like call my senator. I'm upset about, this thing that's going on. Here's how I'm talking to my kids about it. I think that can then feel like we are taking action because when we feel powerless and hopeless, then we become powerless and hopeless. And yet when we take action, even if it's the smallest thing, like sending an email to our senator or organizing a cleanup in the park or driving a little bit less and carpooling more, something environmental, or just being kind to someone, Like, recently I was just having a rough day after, reading difficult things about the world. And someone like at the gym just held the door for me. And I was like, oh, like there's human kindness in the world. Like that's actually a huge relief. Like, even if that little oxytocin connection doesn't last all day, it's like a little spark, it's a little glimmer, as Deb Dana might say, of human goodness out there. And we need to be showing each other that in these different ways. We need to be showing our kids that in these ways, to smile at people, to hold the door, to perform generous and kind acts in front of them is also really important. And to talk about the classic Mr. Rogers advice of when we see difficult things or tragedies in the world, to talk about and point out the helpers, like that there are a lot of helpers in this world right now. There are people who care. There are people who are fighting. There are people who are doing these things. And not only are there helpers out there, but we can be those helpers. We can clean up the beach. We can do these things together, and that can be really empowering thing to show our kids too.
Yeah, totally. Chris, I want to go back to your son's question about why other countries, just for a minute.
Do you want the answer? Because I'm
But I'm thinking about astronauts who see Earth from space as one, just sort of one unit. And often their lives are changed by the mystery of that and kind of the oneness of that. So I love that he is posing that. We don't have any we don't have answers for him, but yeah, and just that awe. And I think you said too is having kind of a sense of awe and the wonder of nature impacts our brains. That there is actually an impact.
It does. Positive psychology has looked at this. Dr. Keltner, Jonah Paquette have written extensively about this. There is some sort of like name for that, sort of seeing the Earth from space syndrome or something.
Yeah.
But I think just like being in nature, we know that if we look at things with that sense of awe, actually, like people act in ways that are more compassionate afterwards because they feel this connection. And so whether it is looking at the redwoods, staring at the ocean, these other kinds of amazing beautiful things, beautiful places in the world, the Grand Canyon, I was in Santorini a few years ago, just like mind-blowing. And so there's that, and then there's also like what humans have created, the awe that goes with. I think this is why spiritual places are so beautiful, looking at the Taj Mahal, looking at the Hagia Sophia, looking at a cathedral, a European Gothic cathedral that actually imitates the lines of the forest. Palace looking like the cliffs in the Himalayas, because it promotes and provokes that same sense of awe and wonder. And I think that's why so many places feel so spiritual. They're doing something to our brains when we experience awe.
Thank you so much for such an engaging conversation, and to everybody who has tuned in.
Thank you both so much. This has been a really great conversation. I feel like I always do my same talking points, but you really brought out some more insights from me. So thank you.
Good.
What you're both doing is phenomenal, and congratulations again.